Hey, friends. So, do you remember me? Do you remember this show? I hope so. Thank you so much for your patience. I still have you here and you're still listening in. The support, even through my lack of consistency, has meant a lot. When I started Radio Menti, I was super gung ho about making sure that I had an episode every week. And then I got really excited and I started releasing like a lot of content at once. And, this has been an interesting project delving back into the podcasting world because you set a plan, then life happens. And when you're doing something as a labor of love and doing a million other things, sometimes stuff can fall to the wayside. And I apologize for letting so much time pass because I love this show. I love my listeners. I love you. Oh man, geez, so much has happened in the last few months since I've released new episodes. Um, I took a bit of a break to just enjoy a wave I've been riding, which is the uh, beautiful life experience of falling deeply in love with someone. Um, Without getting too gushy or getting too much into detail, essentially, I met the love of my life, fell in love, got engaged, moving to Mexico, still splitting my time in LA. But I'm going to give you all those updates in another episode. I plan to do a solo cast in the coming week or so, get back on track, keep you up to speed, and let you know why I took such a long pause beyond the Cliffs Notes version I just gave you there. But anyway, I recorded this episode with my friend Richie Brown geez, uh, 3 or 4 months ago. It's been a while. We were so inspired after the last episode that we did that we decided to do a follow up episode because we were mapping it out about how the quote unquote spiritual awakening process is very similar to the grief process. And there's a lot of similarities between the two bargaining, acceptance, denial. Those are out of order. But yeah, essentially, like when you kind of come to terms with a greater reality or your spiritual self, there are so many layers to it. Years ago, I wrote this article that went somewhat viral on Evolve and Ascend. I think I also had it shared on other sites about the phases of the awakening process. And I wrote it from a perspective because when I first had my reality broken open after going and doing ayahuasca, I was so fucking naive, so gullible, so like the Chicken Little of positivity. If you don't know who the Chicken Little is, it's like a reference, basically this story about this little chicken that's telling everybody the sky is falling, the sky is falling. So imagine that with like a 20 something white chick just did ayahuasca in the jungle, had her head blown open and saw beyond the veil and just wanted to tell everybody about all the things she saw and how wild everything is. And I called that phase the alarm clock. And yeah, there's basically like other phases of the awakening process that I go into detail about on that article, but it's funny because it ties back to a conversation I had with Richie, who's in this episode, about how, when you think about when you wake up in the morning and the alarm clock goes off, it's like the last thing you want to do is just like listen to that jarring, awful sound that's awakening you from your precious, peaceful slumber. Yet, if you're sleeping and maybe smell somebody cooking cinnamon buns in the kitchen, it can entice you to wake up on your own volition, check out what's happening in the kitchen, take a peek, give it a whiff, give it a taste, and try it on your own. So basically, like, long story short, nobody wants to hear somebody shouting from the rooftops about how wrong everything is. But, if you feel some semblance of inspiration or are enticed in your own time and way, then you can look beyond deeper, give it a try. But there's so many layers to it because as we found in this crazy time we've been in, especially in 2020, that truth or whatever truth that you're finding along the way is nebulous. Truth is not an end all be all, like even in scientific terms, something is considered plausible. I think about the quote from the Kabbalion about all truths are half truths, every truth is half false. Truth is nebulous, and the moment we think we know something, we're deceiving ourselves and getting lost in another delusion, another reality tunnel, another distraction. And staying in this gray area of like, interesting, yes, and no, but I'll take that into consideration, yet is really important. And Richie, who, if you've listened to our other episode, it's a funny coincidence that his last name is Brown, because he is very much the embodiment of the middle path. My Larry David Bowie friend, who's very, very special to me and my heart. And yeah, I don't know what more to say other than to gush about what an incredible human and artist and friend and person he is, and how I really enjoyed this conversation. I apologize in advance for all the inside jokes. I know that that's probably really annoying to listen to two people just share things that only they find funny, but whatever, it happens. And the whole thing with this show is to make you feel like you're listening to conversations amongst friends and make you feel at home, and hopefully you do that here. So anyway, Richie Brown, you can learn more about Richie Brown by going to richiebrowntown.com. He's Richie Browntown on Instagram. His gifs on Giphy are amazing. He's had like billions of views at this point on there, and that's no exaggeration. If you check him out on Giphy, Giphy, it's Richie Brown. Yeah, those are all his plugs. Also, if you want to check out the show that we worked on together, it's called Uncle No Rules. I was an audience member, did some of the makeup. Super trippy, so much fun. Like Pee-wee's Playhouse and a Fever Dream. Uncle No Rules on YouTube. So anyway, until next time, I hope you kick back, relax, and enjoy this ride. And stay tuned for a solo cast update on falling in love and moving to Mexico and everything that's happened in the last few months coming very, very soon. I love you and enjoy.
How did we even, I don't remember how we came up with kind of that thread of connection, but it's just pretty spot on for, I guess, like the journey of like coping with like death of like familiar, or death of ego, or death period, just this phase of grief of existence, right?
Oh, I do kind of remember. I had sent you a quote from that guy. I forget his name now, but he wrote the One Straw Revolution, and there's a quote in there about how he came to this realization when he was a young man that nothing mattered, and he quit his job and was like so happy, and I had sent it to you, and then we were talking a little bit about how there's like two different ways to kind of understand the idea of nothing mattering. There's the very like, negative interpretation of like the nihilist outlook. And then there's kind of a positive interpretation of it, which is that if nothing matters and nothing has any inherent meaning or value, then you are free to assign whatever you want. And so like you can perceive the world through that lens and feel like this immense burden lifted off your shoulders because you're not doing anything in bad faith anymore. Every action is your choice. And so I think that's what that guy in particular was kind of talking about. And then we were talking about how it's like, oh yeah, like the only thing that matters is like that you're here now and eventually you're not going to be here anymore. And that's like the big problem, right? That we all have to experience is that we're going to die and we don't want to.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's the inevitable, right? Death and taxes.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that idea of like, especially with your pins, because you say like, you have these pins that say nothing matters, and they're in this like really fun, like just kind of like poppy aesthetic. But it's like nothing matters, but nothing also matters. So make the most of the nothing that matters because it goes by so fucking fast, and we're here and then we're not, and. I think in this spiritual path, especially for me, because death has been such a part of like my process, like we talked about on the show, like trauma is the gateway drug. Trauma is the gateway to seeking. And for so long, I was just like, well, what happens after you die? Is there an afterlife? Is there realms beyond? What is it? And that can be its own loop of suffering, trying to attach to like what happens after we die, equally crippling as like how to live your life.
Yeah, and it almost becomes like a form of escapism because, if you believe in an afterlife and it's like going to be so much better than the life you're living now, you're just constantly looking forward to this thing in the future and not really paying attention to like, what's happening right now. Or at least that was kind of my experience with like, when I was younger and I was a part of the church. Like it's like it for a lot of Christians, the idea of your normal existence, if you believe you're going to heaven, that's your experience of hell is being on earth. You get 90 years of hell and then an eternity of life in heaven. And that's like such a terrible way to look at your existence.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's like, so what if they're wrong?
Yeah.
Likely they are. So where'd your life go?
Yeah. What if you're wrong? Or what if you get to heaven and it's just boring? Like that was like one of my like hang-ups with the idea was like, oh, so like in heaven there's no sin, no mistakes, no problems to overcome. It's like, what do you do all day? Like lounge on clouds and hang out with naked babies? Like it seems like the worst place to be. I would rather be in hell where demons are blowing trumpets in my butt. Like a Bach painting.
Yeah. Yeah, the triptych of Garden of Earthly Delights, like the hell realm seems way more exciting than the heaven realm. I mean, I'm looking at it right now and like, yeah, heaven sounds kind of cool, but like, damn, like it looks like more of a party over in hell.
It's like, yeah, it's like eternal damnation and burning and suffering, but also there's demons like jumping out of your butt and just doing lots of butt stuff. Demons love butt stuff in these paintings for some reason.
I think demons just love butt stuff, period.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's their thing.
They're poop goblins, I guess.
Oh man. But yeah, I mean that's like one of the weird things too when I think when I was in like Tibet and traveling around and being in these monasteries and meeting different monks and stuff and like thinking the same thing, like, so you have on the Christian side of things, like you're doing all of this to prepare for the afterlife, and then in the Buddhist context, you're meditating to liberate yourself from the cycle of samsara and suffering. But it's like, again, arriving at the same point, it's like, what if you're wrong? Where did your life go? Like meditating in a cave all your life? I mean, it's interesting.
What I think they call that, like the person who becomes enlightened and then they just spend the rest of their life meditating like away from the world. I think they call that like the stone Buddha or wooden Buddha, because like, you know, if you isolate yourself, how can you really claim to be enlightened? Because you've removed yourself from everything that's like troubling. So you're not.
Yeah, it seems like the opposite.
Yeah, like you're not challenged anymore. And I mean, at least to me, it makes more sense to try to navigate through the suffering of being a human being and trying to do it as gracefully as possible, which means like making a bunch of messy mistakes along the way. And then if you can do that, I feel like that's a more respectable, it's a more respectable way of living than hiding in a cave.
Totally. And it's also like that kind of pushing yourself into discomfort. Because I think, you know, one of the things that's been like really healing in our friendship is that like every time I'm the type of person that when I'm upset or going through something, I force myself into isolation. That's my way of managing like my mental health issues, is like I'll isolate myself from people. And then all of a sudden like weeks will go by and I'm like, wow, I haven't seen another human being, you know? But, you know, I've gotten to a phase where like realizing like, wow, that's like, you don't heal by isolating yourself. You heal by being around other people. And when you're navigating like anxiety and whatever other mental health issues, like it can be hard to consider like, wow, we actually need other people to like have life be a little more meaningful or feel meaningful. So again, it's like that kind of like isolation isn't necessarily enlightenment or healing modality.
Yeah. I would argue that like, and I mean, I don't know how to really articulate this concisely, but you know, a lot of people when they have their awakening experiences or you know, they do a lot of drugs, whatever
Both.
the case may be, yeah, they come back with this idea of like, well, everything is love, the whole universe is held together by love, and like, I don't know, maybe I'm just like, my heart is hardened, but that's like not how I feel. I feel like love is maybe the wrong word, and maybe empathy is more apt in that sense. So the idea that we are all connected, and it's that connectedness that makes this whole like Rube Goldberg machine of existence significant. So when you isolate yourself in your suffering, you're like, you're not getting the benefit of talking to a friend and being like, oh yeah, I was real depressed, so I like, you know, ate a whole Daya pizza by myself. Now there's crumbs in my bed, and you know, they laugh with you, and then suddenly this very terrible thing, like while the experience at the time was maybe misery, when you share it with someone else, there is this like lighthearted commiseration that happens. And I feel like even when talking about death, like the same thing, like it's so scary when you're by yourself, but then when you talk to someone else and it's like, oh yeah, like ha ha ha, like we're gonna die, like, you know, what does it matter? Like I just feel like the back and forth exchange between people is what is so special about being alive. And so like it's not love, it's empathy, and like recognizing that not only do you suffer, but everyone else suffers, and that's what connects us, at least as humans. And it almost feels like, I would argue that love was like an evolutionary thing that emerged as a coping mechanism for like the harshness of existence for beings like us that are self-aware. And so then like love is the thing that binds us together as social beings.
Yeah.
That was a mouthful.
No, but it's interesting because like, you know, I think about this a lot about, you know, the limits of language and how it's like this is our thing to like navigate this strange and complex experience of being alive, and like to reduce something like as massive as the fabric that holds together the universe to just love. It's like, how do you simplify something so complex?
Yeah, it also seems so one-sided, because like we associate love with like just absolute positivity, but I would imagine if the universe has any sort of structure, it's got like a positive and a negative. So like if anything, if it is looking back on itself, it's probably looking back on itself with indifference or um like an experimenter, who's like, huh, what happens when I do this? Oh, suffering. Oh, interesting. Like what will emerge from that? Oh, art,
Totally.
poetry, songs. Roy Orbison.
Or what's his face? Randy
Yeah,
Newman,
Randy Newman. Randy Newman, Bodhisattva.
Yeah, and I think that's a point that is so important to touch upon too, like the indifference not being something that I guess it could be like triggering to some, like when you have that, like, shocking, I've been catapulted out of the matrix. I've seen the fucking machine elves. I've seen the fractal geometry that connects everything. And it feels really good because my dopamine levels and serotonin levels are fucking all out of whack. But then, like, you have to arrive at a place where, like, thinking of infinity and thinking of something so big, thinking of like whatever, if it's like the pimple faced kid programming the simulation, like things grow through contrast, but things also, if you look at like, if it's like this massive creation experiment, like indifference is like kind of like their scientific method to be like, well, okay, I'm going to stay here and not remain so biased. This causes X, X causes Y. Give me a little more of that, a little less of that, and let's just keep going through eons and eons of change.
Yeah. And then, the great big thing that we're all contained inside of maybe learns about itself through that process. Um
Yeah.
maybe indifference is the wrong word and it's just like cool, being cool, So it's just like everything's just like, huh, yeah. Um like I always think about, when you really start to like lose your mind, when you start to experience a bunch of synchronicities and coincidences, and you're making all these connections. It's very easy to just be like, wow, and you imagine yourself turning into an Alex Gray painting. But then like I feel like you just lose your mind, and then you just be like insufferable to be around if you're constantly like that. So then like you have to get to a point where those things happen and you appreciate them, but then you're like, yeah, like of course, cool.
Yeah, you got to have chill when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah. So in my projection of how I imagine the universe or the Godhead, whatever the thing is, uh, I always imagine it being very, very cool and detached, invested,
Invested.
like invested but detached.
Yeah. But don't you also feel like there's gotta be a loneliness too? And I feel like we've talked about this definitely, like just in our life chats, but like imagine being the thing that's responsible for all the things. And it's like, what the fuck am I and why am I here?
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot, and it's very easy to personify it and give it like human emotions. Um, and like maybe and I feel like there's like some kabbalistic connection to that, the idea of um this nothingness that is also everything, deciding and having like a stirring that it wants to be able to look at itself, and so it divides itself up into separate parts, and then that's how we got to where we are right now, and we've forgotten that we are all that thing, and that's why we're suffering. But then if we were to go back to being that thing, we would just go back to being lonely. So it's
Yeah.
just like this weird game of solitaire. It's very hard to wrap your head around. Um,
Yeah.
and like I feel like when you tell that myth, and especially when you personify it to someone who has experienced a lot of suffering in their life, they get kind of angry, because it's like, oh, well, if we're just this big things, playthings, how come I just got such a shitty role in the play?
Mm.
Like, why couldn't I be a race car driver?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the dangers of a lot of like the new age stuff, that blanket projection of just like, well, you're attracting this, or this was your vibration that came into alignment, and this is your karma, and all that stuff you take with a grain of salt. Like, I mean, you and I like love going deep down the rabbit hole of all these things, but then like, I arrived to, and I think this was like an important part of my own kind of like growth and segueing out of that toxic thinking is like, when my really close friend lost his 3-year-old to cancer, and it's like, oh, she attracted that. That was her karma. Or when you think about all the tragedy and like awful things that happen in the world, and to reduce it down to like, well, this is just your karma, man. That's that can be really hard.
Hey, man, like everything just happens for a reason. And like, I know you're like real sad about this, but maybe you should just do like yoga.
Yeah, do a yoga.
Do a couple yoga poses and your grief will go away.
Yeah. Take some moon juice. Here's some ashwagandha. That's the cure, man.
Yeah. And I mean, that's what's so hard is that all of that stuff I do think is useful, but I think we, especially as Westerners, take these things and we see them as like a panacea, where it's just like, well, this cures everything. And then like you end up running into these very serious matters, like someone losing a child. And you realize that there is like very little you can offer those people, because like death and loss are just things that happen, and there's no platitude and no like no crystal that's going to change that.
No.
And that's when I think you have to like kind of get real and be cool again, like be cool. And just if you know a person like that who's experiencing something like that, you want to help, and there's not a whole lot you can do other than just be there for them. And like again, it comes down to like, is that actually like the that's like the secret, is just that we're together. So like the best thing you can do is just be with someone and to listen.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's, I think, a really important point, though, too, the act of listening. I think getting lost in this sea of empty rhetoric of like just platitude and quotes and whatever else, like sometimes we just really need to listen to someone else, like in moments, it's like the not doing is doing, like thinking about like very Zen kind of proverb. In moments like that, like just holding space is like really necessary.
As a Virgo, it took me a long time to realize that when a person comes to you with a grief or a complaint, sometimes they do just want someone to listen. They don't want an actual solution. So now, when someone comes to me, a lot of times I'll have to catch myself and I'll have to ask them like, well, are you looking to vent or are you looking for advice? Because like there's nothing worse than giving a person advice when they actually just want someone to listen, because they feel like they're not being heard in that moment.
Yeah. You have such a great way of doing it too, like, and throughout the course of our friendship and like all of the hard shit that I've been through and you've helped me through, you just have this like way of, I don't even know how to articulate it properly. Like the way you respond is like almost like empowers the person on the receiving end to like unpack and realize it on their own. So I don't know if that's just like your Wizard of Oz trick, or just, as simple as like reminding me to drink more water. Yeah, it's interesting.
I don't know. It's probably part of like residual social anxiety too. Like sometimes it's easier to listen than it is to like provide solutions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like the one book that you did, advice that you won't take until you think it's your own idea. Because that's usually where everything winds up being. Like, you could say things in passing, and I think it's just like a human trait beyond the fact that like this is something you experience directly from like your friendships, like with all the people that like come to you for advice. It is a very human thing that all of a sudden the idea or the advice won't really like kick in until you think it's your own idea.
Yeah, I mean it's almost like a universal trick too. Like when you're working with other people, if you really want an idea to land, you almost have to make the other people feel like it's their idea for them to accept it. So like
Always.
it's it's not just like advice. It's almost everything, and I really appreciate that is like a mechanism of the human mind, because I'm at heart a trickster. And so like the idea that you have to trick people into doing things is it's very appealing. And like and we had talked about this a little bit before this podcast started, but the idea that like when it comes to like being mindful, if you tell someone to be mindful, they're going to do everything but be mindful, because that's something that's just supposed to happen naturally. The same way that if you said to someone, I would like you to have fun right now. Start having fun, please. So you have to trick yourself and other people into being mindful. You have to trick yourself and other people into having fun. And like, trick is like a funny word to use, but in reality, it's just sort of like you have to let it unfold on its own. You can't force it.
Completely.
And that is a very difficult dance to do, but I thoroughly enjoy it because I really like tricking people. I like tricking people for their own benefit.
Well, I mean, that's the fun in it. And again, like kind of going back to the last podcast, like arriving in that space where like you have to maintain a sense of humor throughout all of it, especially, when it comes to like the way that you navigate the world, whether it's like through a mindful way or like a non-isolated way, whatever, like you just said, you can't tell somebody just like, okay, that's it, have fun. You're going to have fun right now. You gotta just be mindful and have fun. But if you're just like, well, you'll figure it out eventually or you won't.
Yeah. You outline the two options, and then let them decide.
Then fall as they may. But that again, I think that's also a very Zen thing. Like before we started recording, like talking about like Zen and how to like fully wrap your head around it. And I had mentioned the one story that I can't even properly articulate, but it's like Zen master was teaching a class, right? And he had like a donation cup in front of the class. Do you know the story? Can you tell it better?
I think so. It's been a while since I read that one. But I think the general idea is that a Zen master, he has a class where people come to listen to his wisdom, and he has a donation cup outside, and he watches who donates. And if you come and you continually donate, eventually he comes to a point where he like doesn't allow you to come to the class anymore, because you didn't realize that you didn't have to donate. Or I mean, I think I seriously fucked up the punchline, but the idea is that he is trying to tell them that he has nothing to share, and so like you're a fool if you keep coming back.
Yeah, and I think that's like a very important story, kind of like just for this whole thing too. It's like a lot of the conversations I've been having, like, on Instagram Live and stuff, is like there's no click funnel to enlightenment. So like the modern iteration of that story is about like, you get these advertisements for like, for $444, you will learn the secrets of the universe and unlock the power of your sacred yoni. It's like, no, I don't think that you can get there through a click funnel course.
Yeah, like what are you, the landlord of spiritual enlightenment? Like now you're charging people a access fee to a basic human right?
It's so ridiculous. But I mean, not to veer too far off course. I know like we talked about the whole intention of this conversation being around like phases of grief and phases of understanding these things. And that might be like just a good point to pivot into all of that. Cause this is just kind of like par for the course when you're on the process of like kind of coming to terms with a greater reality than you, and then also wanting to like find ways to intellectualize, commodify, or codify the thing that you're trying to understand.
Yeah. So do you want to just go through real fast, just list off the 5 stages of coping with death, just so we have a reference point for people who are listening, so
Yes.
that when we okay, so do you want me to?
Yeah.
I've got it pulled up right now.
Yes.
So our 5 stages of coping with death, and now this is like it's a psychological model. So there's denial, then there's anger, then there's bargaining, then there's depression, and then there's acceptance. And those are kind of the clean separations, between these different phases of coping. But from what I understand, there are also kind of moments within each one. So within bargaining, where you kind of jump back to anger, and then you go back to bargaining, and then depression, like there's a little bit of bargaining and a little bit of anger, and then you move into acceptance. So it's not just a linear path. It's kind of like a weird gradient with like echoes of the past involved. And I think it's a really apt kind of description also of I think the spiritual process that a lot of people go through. And I feel like a lot of people get stuck in the middle steps and they never get to the final one. Or maybe dying is acceptance. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. And I like how you touched upon how it is like, there's a popular new age platitude about like how healing isn't linear. And I mean, it's a good quote, beyond whatever, but it's true because it's not just like you arrive from shock to acceptance, but there's like little spirals throughout the whole thing. When you can like be in the anger spiral or the sadness spiral or the acceptance spiral, it's really hard because, it's a difficult transition to go through because, when you have that like awakening, right? That awakening moment, whatever it is, whether you have the psychedelic experience, a spiritual experience, like even if it's just like a really fucking crazy lucid dream, reality is never the same. And there is like almost like that word hiatus I really love, and I kind of used to describe a lot of like 2020 as like this homesickness or something that never actually existed. So you kind of like wrestle between this like new understanding of a greater world and then a homesickness for like what it was like before you whatever red pilled yourself. I always forget like which is the pill that he takes.
Well, now red pill is most closely associated with like becoming a men's rights activist or a MAGA person.
Oh, we don't want that.
But yeah, there was a point where I think red pill just meant becoming awakened.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember one of the Wachowskis had responded to Ivana, whatever, Trump and Elon Musk talking about the red pill. And she was like, go fuck yourself.
Yeah. Beautiful moment.
Yeah. That was a sacred exchange. But yeah, I mean, like, so what? The first part of the process, right, is shock, right?
Oh, yeah. I forgot to mention shock. That's kind of like the ground zero of the experience. So maybe that's like your awakening moment, or your first moment where your head is cracked open a little bit.
And then from shock, we go to, is it denial or anger?
Yeah, it's denial.
Denial. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, tying that into like, phases of grief and like the spiritual kind of experience, like, how would you like articulate that part of the process?
Well, I mean, I kind of like, this is where I'm looking at this chart and there's like pictures of people. So like the denial picture is like kind of a woman who's sad and she's in sweatpants drinking tea, with like a little frown. But I feel like maybe spiritual denial is a little different because you have the awakening experience, or your head is cracked open a bit, and you think that you have discovered the secrets of the universe and you are now God or whatever. Or you actually, to go back to the Matrix, you think you're Neo.
Yeah.
So like you have all the answers, everyone else is sleeping, and you've got to wake them up. And to me, that's like that's a form of denial because you've not fully integrated the understanding that there's like still so much more to learn. And so I feel like you can always tell when a person has had that first experience because they want to project it outwards, and it's very annoying to be around. And I feel like my experience with that was a little different because my form of denial was when I was Christian, and so I was just very preachy about that. And then when I like fell away from the church, that was when I moved to the anger segment. And so I didn't ever have the experience of being like, oh, like everything's magic and cool. And like, I never really projected that. I was more projecting the idea of, Jesus, son of space grandpa, and and everything that comes along with that. So, but it makes me think of you ever see Dragon Ball Z, or at least know?
I
Like,
know what it is.
the
I've never
images?
seen it really.
They have these like little things they wear on their heads, and it's like a monocle where you can like look at different people and see their power level.
Wow.
And like you could pretty much like determine who is like gonna rip your head off and who's not. And so like I feel like once you get a little further along, you get to wear one of those power meters, and so you can recognize someone who's in the denial stage. And it's like, oh, cute, like you think you have it all figured out. Just wait. Just wait until you realize that you don't have all the answers. And then you have whatever experience it is, and then you're like, oh, now I have all the answers because I realize I don't have all the answers. And then that's like level 2. But then there's like, there's a million more levels after that. And so every single person I feel on the path has this feeling that they've got it figured out. And then they always have a moment where they're like knocked back down until you have that experience enough times where you're just like, oh, this is not going to end. Like I cannot, there is nothing for me to grasp onto, and I'm better just claiming myself an idiot than anything else. And again, I feel like that's when you become cool.
Yeah.
When you're just like, yeah, I know some stuff, and it's all stupid. It's all useless. I'm a dumb idiot. I'm a fool. I know all about all the different archetypes and the tarot and blah, 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 but I still can't handle like normal social situations.
Yeah, I'm just a big dumb idiot.
I'm just a big dumb idiot.
I saw this meme. It was like really good. It was like a little person with like a toroidal field around it, where like the first one's like, I am enlightened. And then the second one was like the bigger toroidal field. And it's like, I am a stupid baby that understands absolutely nothing. I am helpless.
Yeah. I am baby.
I'm baby. But it is, yeah.
But again, like, and referencing Christianity again, there's that line in the Bible that you can't enter the kingdom of heaven unless you're reborn and have the heart of a child. But what is a child but a big dumb or a little dumb idiot?
Yeah.
In order to get to where you need to be, you got to be a dumb idiot. You have to be smart enough to be a dumb idiot.
Yeah. And there's something really fucking liberating about that, like it's such a trap. Like, when you saw my face when I was like deep into the channeling stuff, and I'm like, it was so confusing because like in one hand, I'm like getting words from another language and like all this beautiful celestial sounding thing. And on the other hand, it's like very like just very me as like a weird fractal element of myself. And I'm like, well, if I'm receiving all of this cosmic insight and I am the key player in this big meta narrative cosmic story, why is my life so fucked up? Why am I in like a terrible relationship? Why am I broke? Why is like everything so hard? But I'm supposedly here to change the planet? Okay. Like, and
Yeah.
arriving at the place of being like, well, that was cool and interesting, but I don't really know what any of that means, so I'm not going to hold on to it, and I'm just going to look at it as a life experience that was like, well, that's an interesting thing that we can tap into. I don't really know what it means.
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting to observe that as an outsider and to be inside of it as well.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess that was like part of, I would say, my probably denial, like the denial of like being like, wow, I'm channeling. And then like my whole life is ridiculous.
Oh, well, it's actually funny you bring that up because as I'm looking at this chart, I'm like, oh, this is just the story arc of Mulder in the X-Files. So yeah, so like I don't know if it's like season 5 or season 6, but he gets to a point where he's just like, it's all bullshit. There's no aliens. It's all the government. And then, turns out it's aliens again. And so he goes through this roller coaster. And I think like watching you go through these phases, you definitely follow the path of Mulder.
Oh, I don't think so. I have high speed Wi-Fi. It's pretty good. Maybe it is the government. We literally like for those who are tuning in, we had a quick glitch as we were talking about this conversation and are picking back up. We're literally, what did you say? The government? It's the aliens, and then my computer died.
Yeah, that was weird. The like last couple sentences you said were really like digitized. It was just like a Wi-Fi problem.
So back to what we were saying about Mulder, it's all bullshit. The government, the aliens.
Yeah, I said the word government and I said the word aliens, and that's all it took. They're on me. Yeah, Mulder follows that similar kind of grief arc, and I feel like whenever we've talked about kind of your path through these things, I've always used the Mulder metaphor because that's our common language that we speak. But it is it's interesting to see, I think, the ways that you've moved through it, and it's like maybe acceptance really is just dying, because I don't know I don't know if this pattern ever stops. I feel like you always kind of double back, we all kind of double back at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's I guess, but you double back with like a new perspective, right? So like okay, like my denial was in the channeling stuff and then my anger was like I'd so I would love for us to tell the story about the paper lanterns on fire. I mean, it was just funny because I saw paper lanterns last night too. So it feels like a really great metaphor of like how moving from anger into like another space. Do you want to tell the story?
Yeah. Well, I mean, do I just give all the details or just
Yeah, I don't. We're an open book here.
So we had taken mushrooms. I think this is the first time I had taken like a larger amount. And we were on the beach. We were sitting in a lifeguard stand, and you were starting to feel very negatively about humanity and just everything. And we're in Asbury Park, so we can hear like the people at the bars just being sloppy and loud. And like, oh, humanity is so gross. Why? Just a whole thing. And I'm looking at the birds that are glowing, just being yeah. And then all of a sudden we hear people right behind us, and like a weird crinkling sound, and they're sending paper lanterns into the air, and they're like so happy about them. And I'm like, see, humanity's not all bad. It's full of like wonder and awe and just doing these little beautiful things. And then, like, right after I say this to you, the paper lantern catches on fire and falls into the ocean. And I'm like, and sometimes it's like a misinformed kind of whim. And then, that paper lantern is going to probably be eaten by a sea turtle and he'll choke to death and die. But, like, it's like at our core, we don't want to do bad, but we have just gotten to a point where we're like so out of sync with the rest of the world that everything we do has like a unintended consequence that's usually a little bit negative.
Yeah. Yeah, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah, exactly. But at humanity's core, I think we just want to experience beauty and joy and awe and whimsy. And then, there's a bunch of things that kind of get in the way of that, or get in the way of us doing it in the most pure way that we can.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the trap of like, being like, oh my God, like this was an act of God, or like it's so mystical. And, finding the chill of being like, well, it's really incredible, this phenomena of life. And maybe, the chill is in like not having to like necessarily label it as some like act of God or mystical experience, but just the great mystery that like maybe is just riddles upon riddles that'll never be fully answered.
Yeah. Lowercase wow. Oh, wow. Wow. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, like, and the acceptance part, right? Like, I don't know. I think especially like, I'm hoping those who are listening to this or maybe like kind of like surfing through similar phases of enchantment, disenchantment, that whole kind of gradients of this experience. It's like, I don't know. I think there comes a point in time too where you like realize like, I don't need to keep tripping or doing mushrooms or doing stuff. Like the more that becomes also like its own thing of like, well, I need to go back in, I need to retouch that realm, I need to keep doing that. And it's like there's also something really interesting in the process too of arriving in a place where you're just like, okay, like I don't really need anything right now, I'm chill.
Time to be human.
Yeah.
That was, I think, the last time we did mushrooms together. I like had like a bit of an uncomfortable time. That was the time where I just like went to the bathroom for a long time and was staring in your cat litter box. Did I ever tell you about that? And
Fresh my memory, because is this the music of the realm? Was that night?
it might have been that night. But the idea was kind of that I was just maybe I like didn't take enough, but I was in the state where it was like I got all the psychological information I needed within like the first hour. And so the rest of it was just nausea and a bunch of weird little goblins, in the back of my eyelids just transforming. And I'm like, this is a waste of my time. I don't need to see this. You're just doing this dumb little show. And like I've put my consciousness in this realm that I don't belong in. And it's like getting in the way of me being like a normal human being. And so while I'm like having like a rough go of it, I'm in your bathroom and I'm just staring inside of your cat's litter box, looking at the cat turds. And I'm like, oh, yeah, like if, and this is like assuming that all the things people experience when they're on drugs is actually a connection with some otherworldly realm or whatever. But I feel like this like three-dimensional physical existence is almost like a vacation from being an Alex Gray painting. Like imagine just being like totally plugged in and everything is just swirling information all the time and everything's transforming like, the machine elves or the little mushroom goblins. That's exhausting. Like I can't handle more than like 8 hours of that. Imagine like an eternity of that. So like at some point, maybe like, these supposed consciousnesses are like, you know what? I'd really like to just like be a human and like have to clean cat litter, pick up a cat's turds out of the, not with my bare, I wasn't doing it with my bare hands. But just this idea that like the reality that we're in, I feel like a lot of people who are more spiritually bent, they have this idea of the next realm being so exciting, but like maybe we're actually not appreciating the fact that we are on vacation right now, and when we die, we're going to go back into this like chaotic hellscape that is just like such a hassle to navigate.
Yes.
And like, so that was like a significant experience for me, because it made me realize how much even you or I like are like avoiding being human by doing these things sometimes. And like, it's sometimes more important to just watch a movie or like, spend 3 hours doing a bit about Arby's, Arby's punchlines, writing fake commercials for Arby's for no reason.
Yeah.
Like that, maybe that is what we're here for. We are here for the fake Arby's jokes. And then like, you don't have to do anything to get to that next level, because when you die, you just go there. And so like everybody who's trying to get there is just rushing through maybe the most leisurely part of the experience.
Yes.
And that's all, that's all what's the word? Speculation. I have no idea.
No, but I mean, there's a point to that, though. You know what I mean? Like, take it as you will or don't. Like, there's really only two options, like yes or no. But it makes me think of that Alan Watts skit that I love, that the South Park guys had animated, where it's just like, you don't listen to a song to just get to the end. Like you're enjoying all the different notes of it. And, I think this cycle that like a lot of, these like 5D earthers or whatever the fuck it is, they're like in such a rush to ascend to the fifth dimension and not realizing, like you said, like here, maybe it's like its own little respite from the overwhelm of like the clown dimensions of like shifting Alex Gray painting shapes, like we're just like, what the fuck is even happening there? Like what kind of existential dread do you have in the clown realm? Like
the 5D clowns just
yeah. I mean, for me, like I really arrived at that place after I did 5-MeO DMT, because like beyond like you can have the mushroom trip, you can have the regular DMT trip, the ayahuasca trip, where you're like in these realms where like you're just seeing everything and like this kaleidoscope of consciousness, collages of all of the things that you've experienced into this weird fucking fractal pattern. But like when I did 5-MeO DMT and like literally went into nothing, I remember coming out of that. First of all, I thought that I was gone for like 10 hours and it was only 15 minutes. And that was also weird. But I remember like looking at the freckles on my skin and looking at my skin and being like, whoa, like this is so temporary. And then that next day you had done some kind of like music thing with Mike Costani. For those listening, Mike Costani was on an episode talking about the best tarot, where he was DJ Desktop.
DJ Oh Boy.
Oh yeah, DJ Oh Boy. Oh, weird. That's a weird synchronicity dream loop, which I'll touch upon in a second. But I just remember being there and being like, wow, like I'm just I feel like I need to just be human, and it's okay. Like I've reached the top of the holy mountain. I don't want to go any further. I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good being here.
Yeah.
It's like, why be in such a rush to die?
Yeah. What? Yes. But I mean, maybe it's like at the same time, I'm sure you're probably appreciative that you had that experience, because it's almost like, okay, well, there's like a comfort in knowing, or feeling like, that there is something else, right? Like you have this like, what feels like an objective view of reality for a second. And you're like, okay, like maybe death won't be so bad. But I don't think you need to be there all the time as a human being, because maybe you'll be there all the time when you die.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, to your point, like, for those listening, Richie and I talked about like this, like we had like one day where when I had moved to North Carolina briefly, we literally spent like 4 hours in the car making up fake Arby's commercials and It was like, I mean, we carried on about that for a really long time because it was just so funny. And there's something where, like, I think also in the spiritual space, it has a very low sense of humor for some reason and takes itself so seriously. And it's like sometimes you just need that. You need to, like, that, those moments where you're just uncontrollably laughing over something so fucking absurd. That's the human experience, you know? Like, you can't intellectualize something like that or try and replicate something like that, but it's like beautiful when those things happen.
Yeah. I also can't really wrap my head around, like, uh, having any type of spiritual leaning and not having a sense of humor. Like, how can you look at everything and not think, oh yeah, this is like a joke being played upon itself? Like, there's no way that the universe is taking itself seriously. Like, look around. No, nothing feels serious. What the fuck is grass?
Fucking grass, man.
Yeah, what the magnets? How do they work?
Oh my God. What is that from? Oh yeah, Insane Clown Posse.
Yeah, the Insane Clown Posse.
Miracles.
Yeah, like it's just everything just feels like it's for its own sake. It's something is entertaining itself, and we're caught in the we're caught in the way.
Yeah. But also if we accept that we're part of the way, like the obstacle is the way, you know, like if God is everything and whatever, like the universe is trying to experience itself, the universe exists within that Insane Clown Posse Miracles.
Yeah, well, think about that. Imagine some supreme being, or like, you know, if God is the thing we are all contained inside of, and it has some form of sentience. It created the Insane Clown Posse and the Insane Clown Posse's Miracle song. That is somehow part of the plan for self-discovery.
Yeah, it's all happening, you know?
So is what was that movie, Gooby, with the that weird bear? Like, all of that. Like, millions of years of evolution bring us to the Insane Clown Posse and Gooby and Guy Fieri, who, you know, like, all things considered, turned out to be like one of the nicest human beings in the world. Like, we all make fun of his hair, but he's like so generous and so giving.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, there's just so much to laugh about. I mean, there's also a lot to be sad about, but
yeah, but I mean, it's balance, right? Like being able to hold both. Like, it is hysterically absurd that the creator of everything created those things, and it is fucking hysterically tragic that the creator of all those things created genocide and rape and all the horrors of the human experience. But for some reason, they're all intertwined in this infinite ocean of samsara.
It's truly a Renaissance deity, right?
Yeah.
It just dabbles a little bit in genocide, dabbles a little bit in horror rap, it dabbles a little bit in
Gooby,
you know, Gooby, Troll 2,
Fongy.
The old Fongy.
But that's acceptance, right? Acceptance that, you know, it all is absurd and we're all going to die. And, you know, the empathy is the tie that binds, right? I feel what you're feeling because I feel it too. And it's all fucking weird.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know where we are on time, but I feel like this is a nice little tie-in. I had read about how, you know, a baby crying, the like frequency of it is so annoying that it has to be addressed. And so, like, crying as a mechanism for humans is this, like, it's signaling to others that you need help. And laughter, which you also cry during, like, the two are connected, could be seen as sharing, like, expressing the inverse of crying, which is I'm helping myself and I'm helping others by laughing. So it's like the cry is I need help. The laugh is I'm helping myself and also willing to, I'm available to help others. And I think that that's kind of a very nice way for me, at least, to put these two things, which as far as we know, are like very human experiences. I don't know if any other animals laugh or cry.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially like both, you know, like maybe
Mm-hmm.
an animal will cry but won't laugh, or maybe an animal will like laugh but not cry. But it is such a human thing that we are the tragedy and the comedy.
Yeah. Or that you can segue like from one right into the other. You know, when you're having a real rough go of it, I feel like you are hysterically crying and then you're hysterically laughing. And then like sometimes you're hysterically laughing and then there's a moment of pause. I feel like you've experienced this before where you're laughing with a group of people and then it's just like complete silence. And it's like almost like in that moment there is just like a realization that you've like lost complete control and also like, well, what now?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Or even just like amongst us, you know, like fucking laughing in the car for an hour about Gralfredo, like, and then being like, well, wait, why? Why did I do
Yeah,
that?
what? Yeah, like did I just waste time?
No time is wasted when you're laughing. That's for sure.
No. I mean, we talk about time as if it's something we possess, like money.
No, we
You
don't.
can't really spend it or save it or
Yeah.
do anything with it.
And isn't that funny? That's the metaphor that's used for time. Like, I'm going to spend my time, I'm going to invest my time. But really, it's not a liquid asset. It's more gaseous.
Yeah, it's like the thing that you are contained inside of. Like there's some like children's record I have that's like teaching kids how to tell time,
Yeah.
and it opens with this woman like just very friendly in her delivery, but it's like kind of ominous. She says, "You don't tell time. Time tells you."
Oh
And it's
boy.
like, whoa, that's a deep thing to drop on an 8-year-old.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a nice thing. I mean, like, who knows how that psychologically will inform that child? That, like, one day they wake up at 28 and they're like, "Wow, time told me that's right."
Yeah. Whoa. Time told me. What if my blue is not the same as your blue?
The rabbit duck. I mean, really, like, I feel like that's my favorite thing, and I've talked about it so many times on here. But it's like, yeah, rabbit duck. What if your blue's not my blue? What if my purple is your pink? What a
Yeah.
world, Richie.
What a world. And the rabbit duck, I always like to be the asshole who is like, it's actually neither. It's ink on a two-dimensional piece of paper. Like,
Yeah.
you know, and I think that that's like an important angle to look at things from sometimes, where it's like we want to categorize things, but they're just as they are without the definitions. You know, so like
Completely.
that's like the ultimate lesson I feel for me of the rabbit or the duck is that it's both and neither, because it's something else entirely that you're not even allowing it the option to be.
Yeah. I mean, and again, so like this is a great ribbon to tie it all up in. Like you say also, well, it's neither, it's both and neither. It's the pen, the ink on the piece of paper, but then when you zoom out further, it's really just a bunch of nothing vibrating together to inform this illusion that we're perceiving through our sense making faculties,
Yes.
you know. So
Perspective.
yeah, nothing matters. Nothing also matters.
Yes. And
But
I'm thinking Arby's.
I'm thinking Arby's, and what a perfect note to end it on.
That's the title. Make this the title. I'm thinking Arby's.
Perfect. All right. Well, until next time, Richie, this was great. As always, you're the best.
Yes, thank you.